Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast lovers. It's Shipping Podcast Friday. I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time, because I am going to introduce you to a friend of mine. His name is Kleppesto, and he is a jack of all trades. He does so many different things, and he's such an interesting person. But in this context, he is the director and founder of Komptensepartner, which in English would be Komptensepartner. So he is a consultant with a very big network. He knows everyone. He knows twice as many people that I know, and he's got so much to tell. We've been talking about this for a while, and finally, on the 25th of October, I walked into the Norwegian Shipowners Association's building, where Tom has got his offices, and we sat down for this, the 81st episode of the Shipping Podcast. I hope you will enjoy it. This is Tom Kleppesto for you. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Tom Kleppesto. I am general manager of something called Shipping and Ocean Network in Oslo, formerly known as Bulk Forum. And I'm also the secretary to the board and director of something called Oslo Shipowners Association, which is the Oslo chapter of the Norwegian Shipowners Association.
And
that's some of the things I do.
What is your background?
My background, Lena, is I'm a civil econom, as we say in Norwegian and Swedish, which is Master of Science in Economics and Business Administration from the Norwegian School of Economics in Bergen, NHH. And actually, I spent 12 years at the school. I guess you don't know that, but I started as a student, but then I was caught up by to work behind sort of the walls. I think you know Tor Wergeland, Victor Norman. Tor was the number one in shipping in those days, and I was caught up by him accidentally, and I worked with him when he was director of something called Center for International Business, and I followed Tor later on. I was actually hired in the end to be his PA, I think, to keep track on what he was doing, and had a fantastic time with him, and that's also why I ended up being there for so many years. So I worked with shipping already back then in the 90s at NHH.
But you didn't consciously decide to go into shipping? That just happened?
Well, that happened, which I can tell you about later. But actually, when I was a kid, I guess like many kids in those days, I watched the Onedin line on television. And, I was so amazed by James Onedin. And I had a dream of becoming a ship owner, I guess many boys and girls had that at the time. So I'm very happy I don't own any sail ships or any other ships, but it was an amazing thing to watch on television.
So what do you do nowadays then? What do you do in your everyday job?
Well, what I do every day, I've just finished working with something that has been a lifestyle for me, as you know all about, Elena. I've been in charge of the Maritime Trainee program for the Norwegian Shipowners Association since 2004. That's 13, 14 years. We are finishing now. We had the last module for group number 10 in London in June, and actually tomorrow, on the 26th of October 2017, we are going to have the diploma ceremony. So the graduation for group number 10, which is my farewell to Maritime Trainee. So when I'm not doing that, as I don't do anymore, now I'm in charge of these things I told you and some other things I do. I also work with the Norwegian School of Business, Torgeir Reve, to establish a Center for Ocean Business at BI, which is extremely interesting. Ocean business is about the ocean, not only the maritime, but the maritime and the marine and the seafood and everything that has to do with the ocean. And that's really, really the next thing. So that's what I do now after Maritime Trainee. But I organize a lot of events. So last week we had events in Oslo and Bergen. I'm organizing a very exciting meeting with Kristian Siem about management, restructuring and capital markets in Oslo this coming Monday, which is only for a select group of people, only the top leaders of the industry. I am working with the Christmas dinner for the Oslo Shipowners Association, which is another thing I do, which is quite fun. A lot of work, by the way. But that's something that is very traditional, like many things in shipping. So this year we have the 58th year in a row with the same thing at the 7th floor of this house, Norwegian Shipowners Association. We have Sølvguttene, I don't know what that's called in English, the Silver Boys or something, which is a boys' choir, but we have a full choir. That's what people dream about all December in Norway. So we have that, and we have lots of people. We have 80 people approximately coming. William Williamson and his wife are coming, and many other people like that. So that's a place, and as you know, I have invited you to come as well, because I think you can find many nice objects for your podcast among those people. So, like 2 days ago, I went to the parliament, and I came with a bunch of envelopes, and I gave it to the security guard, and I said, can you please pass this on to the people named on these envelopes? And he was, of course, skeptical, and I said, well, this is from the Norwegian Shipowners Association, and are you from there? Yes, and I've even packed all these myself and put the labels on, so everything is safe. Okay, and today I got the 4 first, because we invite many members of parliament, the Committee of Finance, the Committee of Industry, and all the ones who are on the Oslo bench, as we call it, representatives from Oslo, regardless of parties. So that's another thing I do, it's like a party organizer. But that's an amazing event. I hope you can come.
Thank you. Going back to the trainee program.
Yes.
How did that start?
That started in 2004. I was consulting in Hartmark Consulting, and a very good friend of mine from my studies and a good colleague, Erik Jacobsen, he worked already then as an advisor for the Norwegian Shipowners Association. And they had come up with an idea to start something to attract students, young students of economics, business administration, law, technology, engineering, naval architect, to what we call a land-based career in the industry. Because they had discovered that none of the companies, except Norske Veritas at the time, were listed as most interesting company to work, by Universum from Sweden and things like that. So they realized that many of these companies are too small to be attractive as such, but if we could gather them in a trainee program, perhaps the industry could be seen as relevant and interesting by students. So they had come up with something called Maritime Trainee, and they needed somebody to do that. And then as a consultant in Hartmark, I was allowed to make a proposal to come up with a bid. And I know that some others did as well. But we got that. And to me, that became sort of a life-changing thing, because from then on in 2004 until now in 2017, it's been a lifestyle, a fantastic lifestyle that has involved recruiting of people. It's been involving being a travel guide, travel organizer, a competence advisor, all the things I have done previously in my life as well. I've been working with competence since I was finished my studies. I've been working as a travel guide and course leader with EF Language School, the Swedish in England for many years, for 10 years. So I've been a journalist. I've been doing lots of things, so I could combine all of these experiences into one thing, working with Maritime Trainee, which was a fantastic journey. And, to be allowed to travel around in Norway and Sweden. I've been in Chalmers many times, a few times at KTH in Stockholm. I've been in all over Western Europe to present the program to students, to attract students. And what has happened has been that even though they never perhaps applied for the program or never accepted the program, as many were, by the way, they have told me afterwards that, oh my God, I didn't know this about this maritime industry. I didn't know it. And now I know it. I think it's so exciting to work. And I ended up being a bit cocky the last few years with Maritime Trainee. And I said when I had presentations, I would say to the students, so, what industry do you think is the most interesting and so on to work with? I said that before the presentation. And then afterwards I said, we have just presented for you the most exciting trainee program in the world. And I always stress, I don't say it's the best, but I say it's the most exciting. Why? Well, if you want to work in an industry where Norway is among the leading ones in the world for almost centuries, at least decades, and you want to work with the leading companies in that leading industry, in that leading country, well, this is for you. Welcome. So it's been a fantastic journey, and I've been fortunate to be with all these young people around the world on these different modules in Norway, different places in Norway, in London, in Singapore, Dubai, Copenhagen, Hamburg, and so on. And to see these young people from their students, to pick them up as students, take them into their first job, and to follow them for 2 years. And of course, afterwards, now that they are alumni, I meet them everywhere. But, it's been absolutely amazing. And I think that because we had so many applicants, we could choose among the absolute best ones. And I think the future of this industry is very safe with all these people that have come into it.
I remember when you told me how the selection, how you did that.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, could you please just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can do that. We had, of course, an application process. We had, let's say we would have 10 or 15 companies that would all together have a need for like 20 trainees, for example. Some of them might have 1 to 2.
And what were the companies?
Well, what they did, the companies, they made some requirements. Either what they wanted a civil economy, Master of Economics, Business Administration, or naval architect or something, or perhaps they would be open to different categories. And then we had a very good cooperation with a company called Bønes Virik and Katrine Sørensen, who was in charge of that. And so what happened is that they were the ones who did the sort of selection process based on criteria from the companies. I was the one who marketed the program, and then they got all the applications. And any students could apply for many different jobs that were sort of relevant for that person in the same group. And they were the ones to pick candidates for the companies. They would rank them and send the list of the top 10 to the companies. And then together with the companies, they would select top 5. Those top 5 for each of the available posts in the program, jobs. Each of those top 5 would be invited to what we call career days, assessment days. 2 days outside of Oslo. So they would come the first day, all of them very excited, with suitcase in case they had to spend the night, which they didn't know. And company representatives would be there as well. We had a fantastic gathering, many people. It was a huge event. And then that first day, all those 5 would be interviewed by their different companies, the ones they had applied to. And if a student had applied for more companies and been selected to be interviewed by more companies, that trainee or that student would then have different companies to be interviewed by. One of them at one time had 4 companies that wanted the same student. So we had a schedule for interviews and so on, and when they were not interviewed, they were waiting we had this lounge for them. And my job was to be there, hang around, talk with them, calm them down, and all that. And at some point during the afternoon, all the companies would report to Bønes Virik's team with Katrine and her team to say that, well, we want to move on with those 3 and we want these 2 to go home, basically. So then all the students were gathering back with the different companies where they were given the message 1 and 1, whether you are on for the next day or not. So then it was my job sometimes to stand there and see people coming crying and sad, and I would comfort them and I would say that, well, it's okay to be sad now, and thank you for now and hope to see you again and hope you will end up in this industry after all and all that. So we had the sort of, I wouldn't say losers, but those who didn't get the chance to move on, they would go home with their suitcase unopened. And then the 3 other ones, normally 3, would be so happy and cheering, and they would check into the hotel and they would go up to the room and open the suitcase and, dress up for dinner. And then they started to realize that, oh my God, now it's getting worse. So the dinner would be all the companies around different tables with their candidates. And we had a lovely dinner, but they were still being interviewed, right? It was an interview situation. So me and Katrine and the Bønes Virik team, we would sit on ourselves and let this, this thing play its own. It was fantastic to see how this happened. And sometimes if a candidate had different companies, he or she would move around. And of course, we had chosen one of the candidates to give a speech. We saw them. We tried to find one person who we thought could take that challenge. And we always found somebody and we said, you will give a speech tonight at the dinner in English. After the group 7, everything was in English. And they would do that brilliantly. It was amazing. So, and then of course they went to bed, and the next morning they had in-depth interviews with those 3 people, lasting for 1.5 hours each. And based on those in-depth interviews with 3 people, 1.5 hours, they would go for one of them. And then sometimes they would say, oh my God, all these candidates are great. One time DNV, in the boom, I remember DNV, they picked one and they gave an offer to all the other four for normal jobs. And then want to become a trainee. So many companies would say to us, oh my God, this is the worst choice in my life, at least my working life, because they're all so good, but you have to make a choice. And we choose this one, but that doesn't mean that these other two are bad. They're all so good, but we have chosen this person, man or woman. So that was it. And then they were so happy. They went home to finish their studies and all that. And then we had a kickoff in April or May here in the Norwegian Shipowners Association, which was the first time they met as a group. And then they will start in August. But the kickoff was a full day with lots of presentation and lectures and expectations, to align expectations. What would be their expectations? What would be our expectations? And so on. And of course, a dinner in the end. And from then on, they felt like a group.
And the training was for 2 years?
2 years with 6 modules. So we had 36 days altogether as modules. The modules would be in Norway. We had 4 in Norway, different places in Norway. We had one in London at the end. And then in the middle, we had a week in Singapore. The last group number 10, we exchanged Singapore with Dubai. And we exchanged Ålesund and Trondheim with Copenhagen and Hamburg, which was really interesting. And, to come from Norway to Copenhagen in Denmark and to Hamburg in Germany, being 2 of the other big shipping nations, was really interesting. We should have thought about that earlier, but we have always wanted to try to be in Bergen and Stavanger and Ålesund and Trondheim. And the first module will always be just outside of Oslo and including a sail trip for 3 days, which was really a bonding thing. 2 or 3 different sailboats.
So they worked in the
they worked in the company. So they worked. So they were hired by a company. They worked in the company, and they would have rotation like trainees have in most of these companies. Given that they would be big enough to have a system for rotation or a possibility, they would have. Most of these companies, of course, have international departments. So they would normally have 6 months abroad as a part of it. They would all have a mentor. And so on. So it was a full trainee, we call it a management trainee program.
So did they get employed by the company afterwards?
Yeah. No, most of them got a regular job contract in the beginning. Some of them had what we call lærlingekontrakt or trainee contract, which meant that they could risk to lose the job and one did, not because he was not good for the job, because he was, but because the company decided to move most operations to Singapore just as he finished as a trainee. All the others, they continued to work in the companies, and the retention rate, how long they worked in the companies, has been very high for this program, extremely high. And another thing is retention rate for the industry. Most of these trainees still work in the maritime industry, which was also important, of course, when they started.
So how did you finance all of that?
Well, this is all financed by the companies. The Norwegian Shipowners Association, they would take the sort of financial risk. And after these 10 groups, including, finance crisis and everything we've been through, we have come out more or less even after 10 groups. We had a big deficit for a while because we had the finance crisis, we had a fixed cost for the program for the companies. And at some point we had some big deficits. So without the Norwegian Shipowners Association being a sort of solid partner, this could have gone a bit wrong. But we managed to catch up in the end, and now after Group 10, we are almost even. But this has been, also, a marketing for the maritime industry that has been quite extraordinary. And of course, I have some fun stories about this. I can tell you one story that's really fun. I really enjoyed going to the UK for recruitment and presenting that I started in Edinburgh, in Scotland, and I would go to London to CAS. And I would move on to Southampton, and a few times I was also in Portsmouth. But one time in Scotland, just after the 100th anniversary of the Norwegian Shipowners Association, they got a new logo. And Elizabeth Grigg, she was, you know her well, I know that, but she was the first female president of this man-dominated organization and industry. So she was the chairman or the president when we turned 100 years old. And they decided to have a new logo for the Norwegian Shipowners Association, going away from this Viking ship logo they had, which you still find on the door and symbols around the house, to something that was extremely modern. It was a box with two sort of, one part of it, the top part would be blue and the lower part would be greenish, so bluish and green, meaning the horizon, the sea and the sky and the horizon. But, if you were a bit naughty, you could say that this was extremely banal and a kid could draw it with just some pens, and so it was a kind of simple thing. But it won some prizes, actually, this logo. And I was in Scotland. I was introducing this for the first time for students in Edinburgh, different schools in Edinburgh. And we had this restaurant that we had a presentation in and some food afterwards. And I made a sort of a joke, a nice joke, I have to say, luckily, about this new logo. I said, as you know, there are difficult times now, finance crisis and all that. So we decided to make a new logo as cheaply as possible with only drawing these two colored boxes. But it actually represents, the new horizon or the horizon. And then I said, and as you know, you are supposed to be the new horizon of the maritime industry. So I don't think I said anything bad, but it was a kind of a joke and they were laughing and all that. And afterwards, a young man came to me, one of the students, and he thanked for the very nice presentation. And then he said, I think you may know my mother. Oh, who is your mother? Elizabeth Grigg. And, my first reaction was, oh, what did I say about that logo? Did I say something bad? No, I didn't. I didn't say anything bad because she was very proud of that logo. So my motto is always be careful because you never know who you meet. But he was a very nice young man, I have to say.
Does he also work in the shipping company?
He wanted to become a trainee. I don't know what happened to him. Because some of these Griggs, they work in other companies first and then they join the family business. But that generation, that's 14 people. I think it's the 5th generation, isn't it? And all those 14 people, young people, they can't work in the companies. We had another one later on, the son of Per Grieg, who is in charge of Grieg Seafood. Thomas, very nice guy. They're very nice people, these people. And he now works with Ernst & Young. And I think if he wants to join the company later, he has got a lot of experience from where he was a trainee in Seadrill and then working out with Ernst & Young, so that if he enters the company, he will have a lot of external experience that I think is very important to run a family business forward. Right?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And you could only imagine the seriousness of knowing that one day you are going to take over the company. That must be a heavy thing.
I come from the countryside, and I had many friends in my childhood who were farmers, sons and daughters. And of course, it's a big difference between farming and shipping, because ships can move around. A farm is stuck. But the same thing is that you really want to give it on to your next generation in a better condition than you yourself got it. That's the same thing. And who would like to be the 5th generation ship owner who fucks up the whole thing? Nobody wants that. So it's a very big responsibility they have. Now, having said that, I can also say, when I think about it, that thinking back to 2004, and now in the last time I was doing recruitment was, I think, in 2014. So that's 10-year gap. And the difference in students, which is then again the future of the shipping industry or the maritime industry, is that they have become more and more concerned about environment, sustainability, all those things you read about and that you, Lena, know a lot about. And it's been a change in attitude, which again means that, as far as I'm concerned, what motivates these people is something different than motivated people 10 years ago. As a student, at least, So what makes a company interesting for students today is probably something different than what made it interesting 10 years ago. And this is a message to ship owners and most companies, basically, that there's a generation coming now that is very different from what we are used to. And existing models may not work on these new young people unless they adapt and become just like others when they work for a few years. That can happen as well. But I think it's very exciting times we have now. And I'm very proud of the young people because I have met so many wonderful, young, engaged people both those who became trainees and many of those who applied but never made it through the sort of needle's eye in the end. Many amazing people.
Yeah, but we are an amazing industry to work in.
Yeah, of course. The most exciting. You know why?
You tell me.
Because this industry, what is it that defines the rate of, charter rate for a tanker or a bulk ship or whatever? It's building industry or construction industry in China, or it can be some war somewhere. It's geopolitics. So basically, you need to understand geopolitics and macro to understand what is it that will affect the oil price, the bunker price, the price of chartering. Everything is decided by external factors. So you can buy a ship, the cost of a ship, but the moment you have that ship in your ownership, you are not in control of what makes that ship successful or not, to a great extent. Because things around you will decide that, factors that you can't control. Suddenly there's a Brexit, suddenly there's a Trump, suddenly there's a North Korea, again wanting to do some bad things. Suddenly there's a China that has built too many buildings and now they're empty, and by the way, they will lose a lot of people. The biggest downsizing of any country ever will happen in China the next decades, where they will go from 1.3 billion to 900 million or something. And, that's dramatic. And as a consequence of the one-child policy, I just had this incident last week. We had a macroeconomist giving a presentation. And this is interesting because he had looked at birth rates in China. And he said that, China has more or less the same birth rate as other countries in that region. Then suddenly I had to say something, which I normally don't in those. I'm just a moderator. And I said, hey, Stein, you can't look at the birth rate without looking at the difference between men and women. And I happen to know, as you probably do as well, that right now there's 130 men in China for 100 women. Might not sound too bad, considering they had one-child policy for so many years, which, by the way, killed a lot of girl fetuses, as you probably know, because they wanted to have boys. That's why there are so many boys. But 130 to 100, you might have a perfectly okay birth rate, but you have a up gender rate. That's the problem. And he didn't think about that. So what I tell you is that you can look at numbers, but you have to understand the history behind numbers. If you don't do that, you can go wrong. That's why this is such an exciting industry.
Yeah, and I don't think really people realize that before they're in the industry.
No, I don't think so. But, I bought a globe to have in my office because it reminds me that this industry is truly global. And I think that's so exciting about it.
But how could we become more visible? I mean, this is one way.
That's interesting. We have done that with Maritime Trainee, and when we have been around at schools and universities around in Norway and abroad, we have attracted lots of attention with what we have been doing. We have had former trainees with us, existing trainees, and so on. And we have had some really cool events. One time in Trondheim at NTNU, somebody came to us and said, this is the coolest event ever at this university that we had. So, it's a matter of how much you can put into things and make it cool without costing too much. But I think this industry needs to do more storytelling. Singapore has a big problem. I've been a lot in Singapore since 1991, actually, the first time. And of course, we've been there with all the groups except the last one. So we had a week in Singapore, which was amazing, of course, or 10 days or something. But Singapore, they have a big problem. That's a small country, very small. But it's surrounded by vessels. There are at any given time around 1,000 vessels around Singapore. Now, in the financial crisis, there were 4,000, by the way, but that's another story. So 1,000 vessels around Singapore. So you would think that Singaporeans would have a very strong relationship to the maritime industry. What they struggle with in Singapore, and I know this as a fact, is that most Singaporeans, they see shipping as a dirty industry. They see stevedores, they see people working at the harbors and so on. They don't see the white-collar workers working in the high-rise buildings, working with the shipping industry. They see the banks and all that, but they don't see the maritime industry. So when you tell the story of what jobs are available in these high-rise buildings, not in the harbors, but in the high-rise buildings for people who study business and economics and all that, then there's another story to be told, and they see another image of it. But they have struggled in Singapore to tell that story. And I think in Norway, Maritime Trainee has been very important. Young Ship has also played a role. But you see, Young Ship has this problem, in a way, that it's a very great organization. It was established in Bergen in 2004, as you may know. Same year as we launched Maritime Trainee, by the way, by accident, I have to say. And now it's worldwide, as you know. But Young Ship does not allow students to come to their events. And I understand that, because it's meant to be for young people in the maritime industry. But that means that they have a limited, if any at all, impact on students. And you want to get students to, well, at least when they finish studies, to consider a career in the maritime industry. You might also want them to do it before they become students in high schools and universities, to attract them already in high schools, so that they can choose the way to educate themselves to fit with the maritime industry's needs. So I think it's important to be visible with storytelling as soon as possible, basically, because we have a very good story to tell.
My theory is that we speak to each other about shipping.
Yeah, you and I do now.
Everyone, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I mean is we have a tendency to speak to each other, but we hardly speak to anyone else.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I have been an advocate of this industry for many years, and I will still be. And
I know.
I love to be that.
I also love to be that.
Yeah.
But all the people in the industry, if they all could tell a story to someone else, then we would spread the...
Well, yeah, but I have also been, we don't go into detail about that here, but I have been involved in startups and entrepreneurship, both with the magazine around 1999, 2000, and also in companies that I've been co-founder of. Now in Norway, and I guess in Sweden as well, where you are from, there's a new big focus on entrepreneurship and startups, and all the people, very many people want to become entrepreneurs and all that. I recognize much of what happened in 1999, 2000, 2001, the dot-com boom and then the crash and all that. But these times are a bit different, and we have a lot of focus on social entrepreneurship these days. And I'm around in some of these environments and see what is going on. It's very interesting. But I say that the maritime industry is also very interesting for these people, because a lot of entrepreneurship has to be done in the maritime industry, either directly into the industry or that it will have side effects for the industry. There are so many things we can discuss, and of course we all know the buzzwords these days: digitalization, Internet of Things, big data, autonomous shipping and all that. And all these things are crying out for new solutions and for entrepreneurs. Not to mention all the garbage in the seas and all that, which many people, of course, are concerned about. So, you and I should become younger again. I mean, if you had been, if we had been 25 now, just imagine what we could do.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't have the experience. So.
Exactly. So that's why I guess it's good that we're not 25 again. But, there's so many things that need to be done in this industry. And now you have a much higher transparency than you had before. And, that transparency is interesting, because many companies fear transparency because they want to keep secrets. But young people want to share. They have this fun word or term called sharing is caring. But young people, many young people at least that I meet, they are like that. They can't understand, why should we keep secrets? Okay, so you have developed something smart for your company that will either increase the profits or decrease some environmental impact or something, which is good. And then you want to keep it for yourself. And then some young employee can say, why do we keep it for ourselves? And then the boss could say, well, so nobody else does it. And then a young person can say, oh, so you mean so nobody else reduces the negative impact on the environment? Yes, exactly. And then young will say, how does that make sense? We don't save the world by keeping these things to ourselves, do we?
Or the young person will say, goodbye, I don't want to work for you.
Exactly. And I have to tell you that on the last group of trainees, group number 10, there were so many young, well, they're all young, of course, but young men and some women, but mostly the guys, had this, they urge for the industry, for the companies to speed up. One of them, he came to me and he said, and this was serious, it was in London, the last module, and he said, Tom, I have to talk to you. I have to ask you, do you think I will do most good for the industry by staying in my company, which I think moves far too slowly in these issues, or by moving out of the company and work from the outside to have impact on the industry, as an entrepreneur? And of course, I have to be very careful because the companies are the ones who make the program be possible. And I have never, ever, ever, in all these years, said something negative about the companies to the trainees. And we have also never been allowing them to complain about the companies to us. Then we say, well, if you have anything to complain about, go to your boss. But suddenly I was asked by this guy. And then I realized this guy is so impatient to change things. And he thinks that his company, which is a big one, and they're both in Europe and Asia, things move slowly because, things move slowly in big companies. I can understand that. And I have some ideas about that, how you can speed things up. But, and I don't know what this guy will do. I will meet him tomorrow at this diploma ceremony, and I will ask him, so what are you doing now and what are you thinking? But this only shows that you have a lot of young people and perhaps even older people who are too impatient for their companies.
But these new times also demands a new type of leadership.
Yes.
How do we get that?
That's interesting because, like I told you before we started this interview, I have also been fortunate to work with top executives in this industry. Competence is what I love to work with. I love to see competence being transferred from teacher to students and so on. And I mentioned already that the Norwegian Shipowners Association had its 100th anniversary in 2009. And then we had a competence director called Tore Forsmo, who was concerned to establish a top executive program. We had Maritime Trainee for young people coming into the industry. But then he said, why don't we make something like that for the top executives? And then we said, okay, we are one of the leading in the world. Let's find one of the leading in the world to work with. So we ended up with Duke University in the US. That was very interesting. So we had modules, one module in Norway, one in London, one in the US, and one in Shanghai over 1 year with these top executives. Either they were ship owners or they were what we call the Cs, CEO, CFO, CTO, COO. That was it. Nobody below that. So that was an amazing group of people. And you don't bullshit these people and you don't waste their time. All right? But what was interesting is that we had a lecture one time in London with a man called Graham Codrington from South Africa, who is one of the leading in the world in Generation X, Y, Z and all that, and the future leadership and leaders of the future and how to lead future generations and all this. And he talked about Generation Z or whatever, I can't remember that right now. And I realized that because I was working with recruitment and these young people and some other things I've been doing in these years, including Nova 100 that I built up in Norway, the Swedish thing, with only the talented students, I knew a lot of what he was talking about because of what I've been reading and heard from different lectures and so on. And then I thought much of this would be common knowledge to these people as well. Not all of it, but some of it. And then I realized that most of these executives from 45 to 58 had no clue. They felt this was such big news to them. And they felt this epiphany of something that happened. They were struck by lightning by all this, which was good, of course, because they got value for money. They learned something. But I was a bit surprised. No criticism of these people, of course. But I realized that what I thought people would know, they didn't necessarily know. Because they're not working with these things. They're not working with HR. But then they have kids. Most of these people might have kids in that age. I don't know. So I realized that these people didn't know that they didn't know this. I didn't know that they didn't know this. And sometimes, you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know what to ask for. And I think that's a big showstopper here, that people don't know what they don't know. If they had known that I don't know enough about this, so they could learn more about it, then I think, so we have a big job, Lena, to educate and to bring this message forward to many people.
Yeah, and then I started a podcast.
You started a podcast, and
So
that's
then
really good.
You can listen to it whenever you want. You
Yes.
don't have to be in a room with other people to show that you didn't know.
And I've listened to so many podcasts, and that's amazing. And you have so many interesting people. The fear I have is because now, after 3 groups with Marix, Maritime Executive Program, which was amazing. I mean, that's really amazing. Maritime Trainee has been fantastic, but to spend so much time with these top executives around the world, and you get to know them a bit, on a personal level, that was just incredible. And so many bright people and smart people and nice people. But sometimes I wonder if those people who really are the ones who should listen to some of your podcasts take the time to do so. And what you should do, you should now, how many have you interviewed?
70.
70. What you can do now is to make a menu system that, okay, if you are an executive, you have little time, but you want to learn a few things. You should listen to this podcast and this podcast and this podcast for that kind of information, and this and this and this for that kind of information. And you could even, I have a business proposal for you. Well, perhaps you shouldn't, because then somebody else takes
cut it out.
You can actually, how can you monetize this fantastic thing you do? Because you do the whole industry a service that you don't get paid for. And that's, of course, not good business, Lena. What you could do is to pick pieces from different podcasts that have to do with certain topics. So you can cut and paste different people you interview who talk about the same issues. And you can say, I have now mixed a podcast, 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, about this topic, and this topic, and this topic. And these you can sell to people. And then your contacts, we can find a way to distribute that so that people say that, well, I have this top executive. He's very busy, as they all are, but he wants to learn more about this and this and this. And if he can do that when he's driving the car or he's on a plane somewhere or something, perhaps that's something you can make money on.
Yeah. On the website, you can search because they're all categorized. But I understand that they don't. Because if they don't know there is a podcast and they don't know that there is a website, they won't search.
But I just tell you, if they don't know, that I don't know.
No.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's the big thing. That's a business opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then later they can say, why didn't you tell me I could search this myself? And then you say, well, you didn't ask, did you?
No, you didn't know.
You didn't know. Okay, but from, this is not a joke actually, because it's, I really would like more people to know some of these things I have picked up in all these conferences I've been to and all these things I've learned. And some of what you might think, because you hear so often, is common knowledge, might not be common knowledge, because not all people are at all these places as you and I are, So there's a lot of education to be given. How can top leaders know about burning issues if nobody tells them that these issues are burning? How can the management of that company I mentioned, this big company, know that they have a very impatient young man who is considering whether he, after 2 years of management trainee, will do better service for the industry outside of the company than inside the company? And since I know that he's a brilliant guy, he's one of those you really know that will do something, good. If I were that company CEO, I would say, oh my God, let's give this guy something where he can utilize all his energy to the best of the company and to the industry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Who do you think I should meet the next? Who should I interview in my next shipping podcast?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. Why don't you interview one of these young people? Why don't I connect you with that guy, for example? I'll meet him tomorrow.
Well, now everyone knows what he's thinking.
Well, that's about how you cut it. Well, but that's okay, because, we shouldn't be so afraid of secrets here. I mean, he really loves the company. Yeah. But what he says is that he thinks that things move too slowly because companies are so big. And I understand that, you have... But
didn't we think that ourselves when we were, how old is it, 25?
Yeah, I think so, 26 or something. Yeah.
So that is something to know the youth for. They are impatient. We were impatient at that time as well. I'm still impatient. I never grew up. So I'm still impatient.
Yeah, but you should be, What did Steve Jobs said? Stay foolish and stay hungry,
Yeah.
By the way, I have experienced a lot of things with Maritime Trainee, and I can tell you a short story that this guy caused. This guy is from a fjord in Norway, but he will become something big, I'm sure about that. And he introduced to the module something called a mukkabønner. Mukkabønner is in yellow boxes. It's been like since my childhood and everybody else's childhood for ages. It's almost chocolate. You have mukkabønner and then you have something else in the same kind of boxes. Kremtopper. So you have some creamy things with chocolate and some chocolate called mukka.
With coffee.
It's the same kind of yellow boxes, both of them, and they look the same, so you can easily take the wrong one. And I didn't even know they exist anymore. But this guy, he came with them for all the modules. And then when we had this Copenhagen-Hamburg trip, we went down from Oslo with the FTS COAs to Copenhagen. We took a bus and ferry from Copenhagen to Hamburg. And from Hamburg to Oslo, we took Color Line. And on Color Line, we had this closing dinner for the module on the ship. And then, this guy, he thanked me on behalf of the group for a fantastic module. And then he gave me a box of mukkabønner. I said, oh my God, did you bring these for me all the way? Yes, of course he did, and so on and so on. And I was so happy, because they had thought about giving me this present and brought it from Norway, perhaps, and all that. After that, I was going down to the tax-free shop on the way to my cabin. All I had on me was that box of mukkabønner or kremtopper and my key to my room. I didn't even bring my telephone for that dinner because this was in the open sea. So I came down to this tax-free shop. I was walking around, holding my box, this yellow box of this mukkabønner. And what do I see on display in that shop? Mukkabønner. This was just before their closing time. I had a few glasses of wine. And I thought to myself, my God, he bought them in this shop. He gave them to me, and he pretended to have brought them from Norway because I asked for that. Of course, he paid along. What do I tell the woman behind the cashier when I come to her with this box of mukkabønner? I have nothing on me. I have no wallet, nothing. What do I say? So that's also one situation you can be in. But you were allowed out of there. Well, she trusted my trustworthy face, but I really felt a bit awkward telling this. The story seemed too good to be a lie, right? So yeah. So I took it the next day, and I gave him in. Yeah. No, Lena, I think you should meet some of these young people, some of these trainees. You should be here tomorrow and meet them when we have the diploma ceremony, because these are the future of the industry. And what Maritime Trainee gave them, compared to just a normal job in the industry, was a huge network of people, a lot of knowledge about different aspects of the industry they would never get in a normal job. So you could say that by being a Maritime Trainee, they kick-started their careers. And after 2 years, they would know so much, have been around so much, and have a much bigger overview of the industry as a whole, which hopefully will make them much better leaders, or whatever they will become, than they would otherwise be. So I think you should really interview a few of those people. And they are also, I think, maritime ambassadors now. Yeah, of course they are. They are probably telling their friends. Yeah, they're telling their friends, of course. And word of mouth is important. Yeah. Of course. That's so I will find some of them for you. Thank you. Thank you for your time, Tom. This was a great pleasure, Lena, to sit on this couch with you. We should do that more often, actually. I agree. Let's do that. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I have got more than one reason to come back and talk to you again. I've been traveling, so I have been to Greece. So you will meet a few Greek voices later on this spring. Then I went to Stockholm, where Vista Sweden had organized an open meeting for everyone within the maritime cluster in Sweden to come and discuss gender diversity and Me Too. That was a great event, I must say. I learned a lot, and we had a different kind of discussion than we usually have when you attend maritime conferences. So this happened in Stockholm, and I did a few interviews there as well, just so that you know that I got a few ones in my pocket. And I've met so many people that listen to the podcast, and that gives me so much energy, because usually I am sitting here on my own,
speaking into the microphone and just blabbing away. It's so interesting to speak to people about how they view the podcast and what they think about what I do. And yeah, in a way, I've become a celebrity without even knowing about it. To me, the guests are the celebrities. They are the ones making the shipping podcast a success, I think. Then I arrived back home in Gothenburg yesterday, and I got the opportunity to speak to some young people attending the Young Ship Gothenburg AGM, where we had a discussion about what would the jobs in the maritime industry look like tomorrow? How will the jobs change when we go through this digital transformation? How will we work? Where will we work? And which of the daily applications that we usually use in our daily life, like mobiles and pads and things like that, how do we use them at work? Or do we use them at work? And I got a little bit sad when I heard that there are still some faxes and telex machines around. I mean, come on. How can we attract the young people when they first have to sit down and understand what a telex machine is? I thought I saw the last one when I started in this industry, and that was in the 90s. Makes me a little bit sad. I can understand it, but yeah, we got a long way to go. So let's do it right now. I don't have the time to talk to you anymore. I got so many things on my plate right now. So the next episode is one of the 10 women to watch. You just have to digest this one first, and then there is another one coming up. So, from me to you, until the next time, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.